Hi, everyone. So, I'm Karim Heredia. I am representing the Microsoft Development Center Estonia. But the ideas that I'm presenting here are mine, so I take the blame for anything. But knowing that we have like a big learnings that we have gotten through the Microsoft experience. So, first of all, what am I doing here, right? Who I am. I have been a manager for about 8 years, not only in Microsoft, for different international teams. Now, culture is a passion of mine. Why I say it's a passion of mine is because I usually like this topic even more than the technology topic. My background is I studied computer science, I have been a backend developer, I have been everything that we do in this industry. But what I find like really complex to try to manage is people, right? Because people are more complex than algorithms. I find that this is my passion. Still, I understand technology, right? Now, why am I passionate too is because I have been living in 7 countries. The last one I moved to 3 months ago, actually after I committed to this talk. So I'll be talking a little bit more about it. By the way, the slides that have this background that is kind of salmon or pink, I'm talking about myself. That's the signal that you will see that I'm talking about myself. The other is more like generic knowledge. So one thing is that for cultural topics, it's very easy that people might take it personal, that it might offend someone, so they are very delicate. I usually do it very respectfully, but I hope you forgive me if I say something that probably you take as probably not nice, right? But now, the first question, what do we gain with managing international teams intentionally? The word is intentionally, right? Well, diversity shouldn't even be a question in our industry, right? The more diversity, the better products we build. Capacity, of course, we don't have enough engineers in any country in the world. Estonia is one case, right? But you see every single country, there is not enough capacity. And the more you have international people, the better you can grow. This, in turn, can help you build trust. If you don't have trust, a team cannot be as effective. That's kind of like my intro on why. Now, my example, we have Microsoft Development Center Estonia. About 19% of the people, of about between 450 and 500 people, are from another country. And there is 37 nationalities at the moment there. But also Microsoft has one thing. By the way, it will sound like if I'm trying to sell Microsoft here, and yes, you're right, I'm trying to sell it, but actually it's a real case that we have now a scheme which is very simple for me to go into a self-service system, and I just say, well, I want to work from Italy. If Microsoft has presence there, then the whole process kicks in, and just need my manager's approval, and I can work from Italy, right? But then I will have cultural situation in Italy, or you know what it could be. Now, nationality is one of the most personal dimensions of your identity. You might remember when you chose to be a software engineer, or when you chose to be a program manager, or whatever you do, but you don't remember when you got the nationality because you were born with it, right? So whenever you talk about it, you're talking about the person. So it's easy that the person is going to feel that it's about them, right? Now, this is a photo of my passport. The one behind is old. Now I'm Estonian, right? But I'm Guatemalan. So what a clash of cultures. So I'll go pretty quick between these 4 areas that we have here. The last one is going to be practical with an example about how I have done it in the past. Now, the first point is if you have an international team, you have international peers, whatever way you interact with people from another nationality, you have to empathize. Now, to empathize means, well, by the way, I put the definition of the Oxford Dictionary, so you see how fancy I am that I can read the dictionary, right? But actually, this definition actually means you have to walk in someone else's shoes. One example. At the moment, I'm speaking to you from here, right? But if I ask you, think about how I feel right now, you have thought about something, right? You might think, well, I would be nervous, maybe I couldn't do it, and so on. And probably you're thinking exactly what I'm feeling right now. And this is all what it requires. But now, to empathize with people who are from other cultures, from other countries, involves understanding what they go through. So let me explain a little bit about what both literature, research, or also what I have gone through, happens when someone is working with an international team. So what happens when you are in a new cultural environment? By the way, cultural environment, I'm saying it can be another country, it can be a different team in the same company. The culture is changing at a different scale, right? The term culture shock is what happens in all these changes. Now, can you raise your hand who has heard about the term culture shock? Okay, so a few people. This is a topic that is not addressed directly, usually, especially in tech teams, although I saw in the presentation from Carlos before, it was mentioned there, so it has been addressed directly. What happens is that you have a series of changes, and then your mood or your feelings, your emotions change from each one of them. You start with a honeymoon stage. Everything is great. For example, I told you I moved 3 months ago to Norway. Right now, Norway is the perfect country for me, right? Better weather, better everything. Well, not everything, but I'll tell you about it. Then you have this going down, the negotiation, when you start feeling, it's not so great. This moment, when you go down to the negotiation stage, is when you realize that there is a culture shock at that moment. But people don't realize, and I will mention how you can identify that. But then you might cope with it, you do good, and then there is these variations. Of course, this is a generalization, and you know what generalizations are. Sometimes this happens more often, it can happen several times, but typically the first phase is about 3 months, the second phase is about 9 months, if you want to put a certain time, depending on the person. So it means you will have a honeymoon phase of 3 months. And that's why traveling for holidays to a country doesn't give you enough insight for this, right? You have to live in the place, or you have to empathize with this person before a year to understand what is going on. So what happens in this moment that everything starts going down, that you have a cultural shock? Well, you lose clues. And if you can think of when you have been in a place where you don't understand what's going on, this is what happens. By the way, this is just examples, right? I'll tell you. Food. At the moment, you're going to laugh about that, but what I'm missing from Estonia is that there is no kohupi in Norway. And it's a real thing, because I use it a lot I like to make smoothies and so on. There isn't. And it was a shock for me, right? Of course, this doesn't touch me too much in my personal identity, but you get the idea. Jokes. For people who know me, I'm joking all the time. I have to contain myself from making jokes all the time. But what I have found out is that different countries have different levels of this, right? So I need to learn the humor in every country. And the stress, well, you know. Traffic, my favorite joke about Estonia is that I have never seen a traffic jam in Estonia. I come from Guatemala, where I used to go 2.5 hours to go to work, right? So it cannot compare, but of course, it's a joke too. But now what happens? Some people might never get out of this phase, and this is what they call rejectors. What is the problem with this phase? Is that if you have an engineer working in your team, and they go through this phase, simply they won't perform as you expect them. Worse than that, they will never feel comfortable in the country where they are, but it's very likely that they go back to their country and they won't be able to perform there either, right? So then it becomes a big problem. So this is an example from me. What do you think is the most loaded cultural question that I have found? And you're going to laugh about that. Is true? Is this one. Have you tried to ask an Estonian you don't know, how are you? And then they just look at you like, what's going on, right? But have you tried answering that question to an American? They ask me, how are you? And they say, well, actually, I have a pain here, and then, I have problems with my blood, and so on, and they are... So a simple question becomes so different for different cultures, and you have to realize that. If you have an engineer who probably is coming from Guatemala, like myself, you have to think how they are thinking, and this is what empathy means. What is the most misunderstood word? I'm not sure if Carlos is still here, but he probably would be having the same thought. No, and I'll tell you a story. This is real. A Guatemalan comes to your house. You offer them coffee, and they will say, you ask, do you want coffee? They will say, no, thank you. What would an Estonian do? Okay, fine, right? No, you won't say even fine, just nothing. But then the Guatemalan would ask again, are you sure you don't want coffee? And then the guest says, no, it's okay. And then you ask the third time, come on, I have coffee. And the Guatemalan will say, okay, if you insist. This is the normal process to offer a coffee in Guatemala. But you see, little examples, but if you think about bigger things, there are much bigger things that the offering a coffee, right? So you have to empathize. But the second bit is you have to know yourself. Everyone is different, right? But first you have to know what you think. You have to know what stereotypes you have in mind. By the way, stereotypes are not bad. It's an evolutionary system in which we have to make quick decisions, right? So we have patterns in our brain, that's normal. But the problem is when you take decisions based on these patterns, which might be inaccurate. You have to accept also that you might not know everything. What is a stereotype? It's an oversimplified idea of a person or a thing. It's like, for example, the slide where I said who I am. I put 4 lines because that's what it fits in the PowerPoint, but I'm more than that, right? Yeah, and you are the same. But we have to study that because we don't have all the time in the world. So now, here is an exercise for you. What do you think first when you hear about a Latin American? I'm from Guatemala. You cannot be more tropical and Latin American than I am. Well, there might be more, but think about that. So try to complete, I'll give you a few seconds. Try to complete either of these sentences. A Latin American likes or a Latin American is. I'll wait 10 seconds. Just think by yourself. Okay. So now you know at least what idea you have in this first moment. So I have an example here. I collected it from someone who I'm not going to name, but I'm married to. So I actually asked my wife why she thought before meeting me what Latin Americans are like, right? Okay, we like hot weather, we're exciting, we're lively, we like telenovelas, right? We're very emotional, we like salsa music, everything is mañana, right? So now, some of these clues might be true for many people, but not for everyone. So what is true about myself? I left the ones that are, yeah, I'm emotional. Well, you're seeing me here talking, right? I can be emotional. But then, salsa music. Music is one of my obsessions, but I like post-punk music. I like Joy Division. It's the farthest from Latin America, right? Do you like hot weather? Well, I have lived in Estonia, in Norway, in Montana, in the coldest part of the US, and so on. And those are my favorite places. Obviously, I don't like hot weather, and so on, right? But if you make assumptions that someone coming from Latin America to work with you likes those things without asking, without thinking, you have a problem, right? But now, you have to be intentional. Now, you know, you empathize, you know what you think, but you have to address those issues. Because here is the problem. If you don't address those issues, you will see behaviors in engineers which are pretty common and are very easy to confuse with others. And this is real experiences that I have had. This is a few of the things that you will feel, but let me talk about a couple. Poor performance. Who here knows a peer or an engineer working with you or someone who has had performance which is not great? I have worked with everyone, right? Now, do you know why, right? So what happens with poor performance? It might be that the person feels out of place, right? Misunderstandings. When have you seen that even in a written email communication face-to-face, you say something and then the other person understands something totally different? Is it because the person didn't understand I didn't say it right, or is simply lost in translation? Which, by the way, is my favorite movie, right? It's lost in translation because you say something. You said no, and the other was like, okay, he's going to ask me, are you sure, right? That type of thing. But there is other factor there. So then if you are a manager of an international team, you have to address this issue. You don't have to leave it for later. The situation is that it's very comfortable not to do anything, right? But the problem is you will face the situations and you won't even know if the engineer or the employee working in the team is going to have a cultural issue or not. Worse than that, many people don't even realize that that's the problem. I know of people who move, they feel that they cannot perform, they don't understand anything, and I have a small example, real life story. Now, what you can do, and this is the positive thing that I want to leave at the end, you can learn about it. There are plenty of resources. Nowadays, it's pretty easy to find it, but you have to search for it, right? So this is some of the keywords that you can apply wherever you do it. But I have some examples. I like Goodreads. They have like very good reviews. They have about 165 books just by looking for cross-cultural management. Many of those books might not be great, but they have some rating. You can see that. You go to LinkedIn Learning, and I found that there were like, I remember like 4,000 courses related to it. You have to check are they good or not, doesn't matter, right? There is content. My favorite though, this is the Harvard Business Review. Harvard Business Review offers articles which you can read at the same time that you drink a coffee, and they give you like very good insight. These are just the 5 I found like when I was preparing the presentation, but I have used them in real life situations in teams that I have managed or I have worked with. Now, this is the advertising thing. In Microsoft, we have access to all these things, and that's one of the things that I love in working with Microsoft. All of this that I showed you before, I can access it, like without any problem, right? But now, here is the core of what I want to leave today. I'll show you a practical example of how I have applied these things, and I will give you 2 examples of how I faced these type of issues. When I studied an MBA a while ago in Germany, 2003 more or less, which was about global technology management. My favorite course, surprise, surprise, is called Intercultural Communication. And through that course, I found about Gerd Hofstede. He passed away about 2 years ago, but he essentially, he was a social psychologist. I think it was his profession, but he was very much interested in culture. So he worked on a cultural dimensions theory, which was based on 116,000 questionnaires that he sent to employees of IBM through the whole world. I worked in IBM too, and I understand that this company is pretty much rigid. They have processes which are very much pre-established. It's a very old company. It was founded in 1886, I think, the original company. So then things don't change that much, but he managed to see, okay, the employees of the same company, same processes are different. Why, right? So he applied factor analysis. He came up with the whole framework. It's very interesting. You can read it online, but I'll show you one of the dimensions that he came up with. And this is called the Power Distance Index. Power Distance Index measures how much the less powerful members of a society accept the power distributed unequally. In a company or in an organization, software development organization, you will say how the engineers, which are the most junior engineers, accept that they don't make the decisions, for example, right? The same in a country, the same in a society. If you have a high PDI, means that everyone knows their place. They are not going to fight. They will accept everything comes hierarchical, no word. If you have a low PDI, you will say that the power distribution has to be equalized. Right? We have to be equal. Now, having said that, who here thinks that Estonia would be a high power distance country? Who would think that it's a low power distance country? And the rest? But okay, so here is my real life example. I'm from Guatemala. I'm working here in Estonia. By the way, all these countries that I have, where I have lived, I have worked, I have seen that, and I have to say it's a generalization. Again, it's not the perfect score for everyone, but at least it gives you an insight. So what happens? Guatemala has a 95. It cannot be higher. Well, 100 is higher, but it's pretty much at the top. What it means that Guatemala, you have someone at the top saying, things are done this way, and everyone just goes, does it, right? I'm not going to question that much. Estonia has 40. It's already below the mean, which means you're going to question sometimes, right? Your manager tells you something. How many times a manager says something and the engineer goes back, it's like, no, this is wrong. I have heard it, right? It's okay. Now, this is one of my examples. Think of a Guatemalan manager for a team of Estonian developers. I was in that role. If you don't know this, the Guatemalan manager will come and will say, you all do what I'm telling you. You have 5 Estonian developers, what will be the reaction? I don't need to explain it, right? But you get the idea. And by the way, I saw a similar case, not from a Guatemalan, but from some other culture, similar case, And yes, I saw this sort of dance, and this helped me actually explain, no, look, this is what is happening, right? And it actually helped. But now let's go to the other case, which is my case too. I have an Estonian manager, and I'm from Guatemala, right? This was more interesting because the Estonian manager will never tell me, okay, you're going to do exactly this. They expect me to decide. But I as a Guatemalan, I need the message. So then the Estonian manager thinks that I don't want to work there. I'm apathetic. But I, as a Guatemalan, I think that my manager doesn't care about his job, right? If you don't understand that this is happening, you will say, well, this guy is lazy, right? But if you have this context, you need communication. So anyway, just to finish with the main topic, cross-cultural communication is just like a communications protocol. Take HTTP or take TCP or whatever you want to talk about. You have clear rules, you have semantics, you have error recovery, you have synchronization, you have lots of things that happen through the protocol. Different parties agree on how this communication goes, but it has to be done explicitly. Now, if you're a manager who has multiple nationalities in your team, well, you have to manage these multiple protocols, right? So I would like to leave that here. You have to learn. And one other, by the way, this is the advertising slide. If you can come work for us, you can see that this is the type of environment where we're working in. But also, if you would like to get in touch with me, well, you can just find me there. And then I would be happy to answer any questions you have.